All right, we're preparing. All right, hello, and welcome to the roundtable for the Menagerie. I'm here with some awesome guys to discuss the latest sets from second edition. I'm starting with the person on my left, designer for the set, Jark. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Hello, everybody.
Cool. All right, and then going counterclockwise, Ben Liebig. How are you this morning?
Hey, I'm good. Hello.
And last but not least, Ben Rustiker, other designer. For the purposes of this meeting, because there's two Bens, we're going to be calling him Gorgo. So, Gorgo, how are you today?
I'm fine, thanks.
Cool. Looks like Richard is just joining us. He'll be able to do his introduction shortly. But the Menagerie is the latest set from second edition. The set was all based on cards from the community that were submitted to design. So you guys did more developing than you did actually designing the cards. Do you guys want to just talk about the design in general before we move on to specific decks within the set? And greetings, Richard. How are you?
Hi. Glad I could make it.
Okay. All right. So let's dive in here with probably the most dominant theme in the set, the Cardassian dissidents. This is a theme that already existed in the game before the set, but you guys really took it and ran with it to the point where we actually got the fourth headquarters for Cardassians. Third one in the past 10 sets, though. How did the development of the faction come up?
Yeah, maybe I start, then Richard. Okay, yeah, it was the community set gave us some ideas for Cardassians, but for different reasons we could not make them run, and but we thought it would be nice to have it would be nice to have a mission for Cardassian dissidents. But when we worked on the mission, more and more problems showed up with a possible space on the card that we needed, and it gets more and more complicated. But we found the idea of Cardassian dissidents interesting, so we ended up, mostly because of length and problem with the cards, with a headquarter mission and flippable mission. We started with a mission where the meeting of I guess Ducat and his how do you call it? I don't know what his let's say traders, his dissidents met. And that was the first step, but we could not make this as a mission, so it ended up with an headquarter. It was a side effect. We were aware of it's a new headquarter for Cardassians, but I think it was a good idea. Maybe Richard and Giorgio have something to add.
Absolutely. One of the things I found interesting about working with some of the things that we did was, for me, I like to do a lot of analysis. I like to do a lot of research into what I'm doing. And so, you start looking at the skill matrix of what they had already. And so there was a lot of discussions about how do we augment that? How do we give them the full breadth of what they would need to compete in the game? So they have all the skills to deal with, whatever dilemmas come up, stuff like that. And we talked about bringing in just one cost Cardassians. Just any one cost Cardassian could be part of their crew. Maybe just the non-unique ones. all sorts of different options, and it came down to they really kind of needed their own sort of specialized a group of Cardassians. We kind of had all the named ones out there, so you start filling out their skill matrix and trying to figure out, okay, how can they cover the most number of 30-point missions out there. Part of it was we were looking at, you know, what's come before, and can we expand upon that. And so one of the most interesting things I thought was trying to figure out how to how best come about bringing them new things that, you know, give them what they need, fill in the gaps of what they've been missing up until now. And really what they've been missing is that skill redundancy and ability to select people for the mission selection that you need, because a lot of the uniques, they're designed to be one-cost people, so they have very few skills. It's sort of hard for them to do that. And so that was an interesting challenge, was trying to figure out how to hopefully not overwhelm the deck with just non-uniques that, you know, you like your star power, you like your mains to show up, but also give them the basis that they need for to stand on their own.
Yeah, because, well, when the headquarters can only report Cardassian dissidents, you need to make sure that there's enough to actually viably have a deck.
Right.
Yeah. Gorgo, did you have anything to add?
Just that at the same time, one thing that I kept an eye on is, yeah, these are going in the Cardassian dissident deck, so they have to have enough to run that deck on their own. But you also have to keep in mind that these can also play in a regular Cardassian deck. A lot of these can play in a KCA deck. So there's a lot of balancing on that end as well, because, I mean, you could make a great Cardassian dissident set with lots of stuff in there, but if it's perfectly balanced with them, but causes problems in other places they can leak over to, that's an issue. So that's why a lot of these new cards are scoped in that way. Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, I look at the cards. They did a really good job of balancing it so that they aren't useless in the KCA deck, and that was pointed out on the boards, but they don't unbalance anything when you do that. One of the things that came out and was somewhat controversial was the flippable mission. This is the first HQ that's flippable, and a lot of people on the boards were calling it the Hail Mary kind of a last-ditch effort. But, when you're playing Klingon, when you're playing a deck and you're at the very end and you need to pull out a win for some extra points, maybe you need 10 more that you didn't think of, you can flip the mission and get those points. Good luck doing that with the Klingons.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, it's the second headquarters that flips. But
Right.
Yeah, you're right. It's the first one that flips into an actual attemptable mission. And that's, I think that gives it an interesting feel, an interesting mechanic to play around with. I'd spent a lot of time on the math on that one, and I think it works out really well. There's some fun things to do with it. Let's see, I can't remember how many weeks ago, 2 weeks ago or so, I had a tournament and played these guys, and it was a lot of fun to try and get that, I guess, 2.5 mission win type of situation. And unfortunately, I was dumb and didn't put enough one-cost guys in one of my games. Otherwise, I had it, but I couldn't get that 4 Cardassi off early on in the game, and of course screwed me over. But otherwise, I had a lot of fun playing them because it was that it felt scrappy. It felt like I was trying to compete with the big dogs by doing sort of like little things and saying, I'm just as important as you, and that it was fun. It felt right. So
yeah. So Ben, I know you've been in a few events, including Continentals, after these came out, and I know that Cardassians were big at that one. What was it like being on the other side of the table of them? They played pretty well.
I actually, if I remember correctly, I only played against them once. That was in an online tournament where Brian Sykes played them. And honestly, I don't have too much of a recollection of that game. I just know we were beating ourselves to death with our dilemma piles, but other than that, I mean, I don't have enough. A big of a sample size to make up my mind on how they actually do. In that one game, I mean, I think it's like I'm quite on the fence about the headquarters at this point. I mean, I think at this point I would rather play, standard Cardassia and just do 3 30-point missions and kind of like go the extra 10 points with for Cardassia, because it opens up a little bit more of the personnel that you can use. It's not that narrow of a broadband. I mean, I kind of like, I think I get the appeal of the gimmick, but right now I don't see the flip side of the coin for that.
Cool. Yeah. Before moving on, I do want to point out that with Quark, his image is right after when he says, "Go ahead and shoot me" in the episode, and she shoots him. Fun moment from there, and art captured that perfectly. But from one extreme to the other, the group with the least amount of cards in the set are the AUTNG. I think they just have 3 cards. I knew Ogawa, Alyssa Ogawa, Andro, and a new Deanna Troy. Any designers want to share thoughts on developing these 3?
Probably something that's going to haunt me to at least for a while now is making those cards and then seeing them win continentals while I choose to play something different. That's that hurt. But that wasn't my original pitch for the Menagerie. I came up with a different card, but then there were several circumstances that led to people pitching more than one card for that, and so I had a couple of those that I just basically did for myself, to see how they would work, and so the 3 of them that made it into the set. I mean, I think from what I've seen so far, Ogawa is probably the most powerful. Just pulling cards from the. It's like I think I dubbed it a Borg Queen Light with switching out cards from the discard pile. And from what I've experienced playing against them, that worked out really, really strongly. I haven't seen too much of Deanna, because I don't know, it's circumstantial in the meta that we played. There wasn't that many skill dilemmas that would make her come in and do her thing. But the non-unique Cardassian with his 2 navigation worked actually really well in Julius's why am I blanking on the name right now? The Briar Patch. There's the Briar Patch mission with the 2 navigation requirement, and so he was really playing a very nifty deck in one of the side events where he just pulled ships to that nebula and then started battling them. That was something that I'm gonna have to exploit in the future sometime. But yeah, that's so far everything I got on that.
Yeah, I do like how we have more AUTNG, but they're not all going for the 4 cost theme. So if you get a bad draw, or once you pay your 4 counters for a card, then great, what other personnel am I going to play? Oh, I guess I'll play this random event or something. So I did kind of like how you went a little away from that.
Yeah, since they're from a different episode than the other AUs, we had a fair number of discussions on to what extent they should link in with the others. And we didn't have to change too much from the original pitch that we were given, or set of cards that we were given, but I think the way that they tie in works really well in the end.
Yeah, because I think this is the first time they've really gotten stuff outside their introduction back in the Decipher days within the Mirror Darkly. And then for another bit of behind the scenes, I do want to point out that Troy's image is right when we first see this version in the episode. She's trying to open the door and she's being Worf's wife, and he's got no clue what's going on. So it's pulled from that fun moment. Anyone else want to add anything for AUTNG before we move on? Okay. So the next thing that I have are the Bajoran cards. And so stop me if this seems a little too familiar, but Bajorans do get some pretty cool, complex stuff to play with. But I do like how you've really focused in on the profit cards. I don't think that's been something that's been focused on before. And the profit cards are some of those powerful ones the Bajorans have, Ascension being the first one that comes to mind. So what helped guide you going into that direction with the focusing on the profits with the Bajorans?
Yeah, it was, maybe I start on Richard. Yeah, the Bajoran cards were for me the most challenging cards, but because the cards given to us from community created a totally new and interesting keyword, but that forces us to have a new keyword to change existing cards, and so we couldn't work with these keyword. And we like to try with the idea behind these cards. So, and because we could not so we tried to capture really the idea of the original cards, but we could not make the new keyword. It was a keyword called when I'm mentioned right, it was a keyword called the emissary. It was too complicated because it impacts a lot of other cards. So we tried to work with the ideas and existing keyword, and that lead us to go for profit cards and create new cards. And I have to admit, very interactive and maybe complicated card around the idea. It was a lot of work, and the best interrupts we can work with was the profit cards and profit interrupts. And some of the profit interrupts are very useful, like Ascension, but it is removed from the game, so it does not support the idea of the cards given to us. And the other existing profit cards are more or less not as useful as Ascension. So we created a new profit card. That was the idea, capturing the idea of the creators of the cards. Was not able to create a new set of emissary cards due to time reasons, errata reasons, errating existing cards, and that is the closest thing we could work with was working with profit cards and do something around this. And because the one who gave out the cards seemed to be a very experienced Bajoran player, and he had complex ideas, and that lead us to create I said very interactive cards. So it's very hard to play these and use all the possibilities and options of Bajoran cards. Yeah.
I'd add that I'm sure I'm explaining something that most people know already, but there's kind of like two basic versions of design, which is sort of the top-down design and the bottom-up. And top-down would be kind of, actually, I might be getting these mixed up in my mind, but you start with story, and then you say, okay, what is the card that exemplifies this story? And then you also have, we're going to start with gameplay, and then later we'll figure out the story, that matches that. I could have those mixed up. It doesn't really matter. But in this particular case, with the stuff that we were given, you know, like a lot of the interpretation that we had was this is storyline. This person wants to see the story that they want, that they'd like to be in the game. And so it became a question of like what best represents that. TJ was saying, you know, we were talking about the profit interrupts, and for a long time it was profit interrupts. That was the gimmick, and partially because when you look at the pictures of all of them, they show people having visions and they have that, you know, blurry type of thing. And it was pointed out to us late in the design process that, you know, all the profit cards, you know, like you might be thinking like the events are used, but they're really not that much. So it gives a boost to a whole bunch of stuff that, you know, we don't see a lot of use with. And, you know, and the other thing he said, you know, accession, or I think maybe you said that, Ross. Yeah, that was the stumbling block the entire time. It was like, how do we make it good for, you know, the rest of the profit stuff? How do we make it useful to put that stuff in your deck and not just make it, you know, accession bait, you know, like the timing for Orb of the Emissary, for instance, doesn't work with accession. You have to hold it in your hand for a whole turn before you get to use it, you know. But sure, you can combo those up if you want to. It's just, you know, you have to, there's a couple other abilities that, you know, like the personnel specifically, that work really well with this. This gets them the fuel that they need. And so, yeah, trying to thread those needles and make sure that we didn't make the most powerful card even more powerful, but also, you know, add some interesting stuff to, you know, pull some other stuff out of the binder.
Yeah, probably the best thing that we can say about these is they made a beginner deck out of it. So you can make the case that the Bajorans have some of those complex turns, but when you make a beginner deck out of it, there's a whole other ballgame to it. And I also want to compliment you on making another Bajoran Cisco. There's already a pretty good amount of competition, even though there's only a handful of those. And he works well in the deck, which is something that you can't say about making a lot of new Bajoran Ciscos out there.
When we were released and everybody was talking about how powerful that ability was, it kind of caught me by surprise because we have not found that in playtesting. I think when people play with it, they're going to find out that it's, yeah, you can use it, but, and there might be a little bit more of a gamesmanship aspect to the ability of when do you, you know, your opponent might be ready for you to do, you know, to Cisco your Dolma Pilot. And I think there's probably, there's not a huge number of combos that's going to completely screw up. You very well might, and that's, you know, it is a powerful ability when you use it at the right time, when you're outthinking your opponent, when you hit them unexpectedly. But yeah, it's a difficult one to use at the exact right time to make a difference, and is what we found. And so I think it's powerful, but I think it's sort of tempered by circumstances.
You know, if I can just add to that, I've played against that deck or a Bajoran deck with him in it, and for a while I thought he was only there to eat Polywater, but then again, if he pulls Polywater to the top, you might be screwed because that next one is going to be overcosted, and so it worked. It worked a pretty good deal there. So it's I think. It's right now I would put him in the low key good area, because still that original 5-cost Cisco with the 9 integrity is still, you know, in most cases probably the way to go, but you know, this one works quite a bit, you know. it works quite a bit better if you have a lot of experience with what dilemma combos you might gonna encounter, and then he's gonna be really good.
Yes, and sorry. Yes, and like Benjamin said, when we created this card, we wanted a card to be played not too strong, but we wanted to be played, and we always had in mind there are other versions of existing Cisco, the 5-course Cisco with 2 leadership supporting bridge officers test, supporting these are the voyages. So this card is from my point of view, it's very useful in the right deck, but in playtesting it was never overpowered, and we always kept in mind there are other versions that might be as interesting or more interesting. So I think under this point of view, it's a well balanced card.
Cool.
Yeah,
yeah. Go ahead.
This card in particular went through a lot of internal debate and testing before it even went to play testers to make sure, because it needs to compete with the other Cisco. It can't be better than it in every way. It can't be worse than it in every way. We didn't want to auto include. We wanted it to match the story without being as powerful as it is in the story, deleting an entire armada. So we spent a lot of time making sure that you couldn't use the ability constantly. It didn't completely destroy the balance of someone's dilemma pile strategy, but that it was still something that you had access to on a fairly regular basis if you needed it, that there was an appropriate cost for, and that could feasibly fit in certain decks better than the other Cisco without completely replacing him.
Yeah, I mean, even in a Chula deck where you put, or Chula Dilemma pile where you put the game first, if it's on the bottom, it's still there for subsequent attempts.
And let's not forget that we're talking about Bajorans here, so you could still run both versions in the same deck and switch them out, in every which way you need them.
Yeah.
Plus, he does nothing against single dilemma drops. I have a fun Klingon deck that uses the infestation, and so I like to do the trying to remember the name of the event, heightened perception, so I can drop things one at a time and let them react to things and decide what they're going to do. And every time Cisco sees the dilemma stack on that one, it's 1 high, so it's there's nothing you can do about that. There's all sorts of things that can make him a little less, a little more impotent.
Yeah. Cool. So another big theme to the set was androids. Those are another thing that's been around for a while that Decipher did, and we really haven't done anything with until now. And Gorgo, I'm going to bring up your deck in a little bit, but you want to talk about the design and your deck?
About my deck in particular?
Yeah.
Or about okay.
Either.
Well, for the androids, they existed before this, obviously. They were played as their own deck. They did okay. Sometimes they did really well, but you just never saw them just because it was a very much include every android in the deck, and that's your deck built. Usually you go to DS9 because there's nothing particularly special anywhere, and you only went there for the range. So one of the things that we wanted to do once we had these cards that were submitted was to make sure that there was more choice in what type of deck you wanted to bring, giving them options for, they already had a few TNG cards, but we felt like there wasn't enough to compete with having one span. So we got and added a few of more enticements to that direction. And with the new Kirk, there's a slight enticement to TOS if you want as well. So now there's a lot more androids, so you have a lot more choice in where you're sending and where you're using as your headquarters and which things you include. And they now also have a lot more tools that are interesting and fun to use besides just LOL. So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see them more often. They'll do as good or better than they did before, and we'll see more variety.
Yeah, more tools beyond this is my hand. Yeah, so I do. Yeah, I do like how you kind of leaned in a little bit to the TNG side of things with the Picard, and I've got him on screen. Just a way to give Android something, but include them with their more traditional deck, so to speak.
Yeah, this one I think I can say was one of the ones I pitched that made it into the end. And this one was very much, I mean, most of the cards that I end up pitching for sets that I'm in are very story first. And then it's how do you make the mechanics depict that story well without turning into a 1E card, as it were. So for this one in particular, wanted something for TNG because of all the shows, TNG had the most androids on it that had the most stories on them. The original series coming in second after that. And this was also a fan favorite episode that there just wasn't anything for. And there also wasn't much android protection for brigging at all, which can be pretty devastating because they're so expensive. And it was expensive to protect them from kills because you only really have graves and it costs a discard. So this was a nice thematic way to do this. And also there's a defend android rights mission that has existed for quite a while now that androids just could not reasonably do because they didn't have law, they didn't have the integrity. So this card also goes a ways towards giving them an option to do that thematically without having a sort of mini deck within your android deck just to do it.
Right. And as I was looking through the deck, we also have Sukatsu in there, which it first seems like an odd choice for an Android deck, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Which card?
Blue match.
Oh, yes.
Sukatsu.
Yeah, I'm not the first person to think of it, but
Oh.
with Signs of Sentience, you can put androids back into the deck on the bottom, and there's also These Are the Voyages, which I cut most of because the deck just wasn't running well with so many, but with both of those combined, you can set up a lot of easy blue match 10 strengths androids on the bottom, especially with all the duplicates that you're probably going to run for the 3 androids in hand part alone. So in my games, I didn't have blue match work very well that often, but on paper, good idea.
Cool. Ben, Tiark, Richard, anything you want to add for androids?
Not off the top of my head. I thought they were fun from the very beginning. There was, I think Ben will agree with this one. I think there was a tendency to sort of shrink things down from the original version. We had a lot of things that were like, here's this concept from an episode, here's this personnel that was in the same episode, and so that sort of like can the person do the thing, and then it was can we do the same thing with less cards, I think, and that helps out with exactly what Ben was talking about there. Just let's make the deck smaller and like a little bit more compact and a little bit more bang for your buck type of stuff. And I think Ben was really cool about like just seeing all of that and being like, oh yeah, and making things better. I really appreciate his work on the androids. It was impressive.
Yeah, there was some interesting stuff even before we got to working on them specifically, because there was originally a card that became Stella, mostly the same thing it is now. But the card that downloaded it was Stella. And the problem with Stella as a personnel, and in playtesting, we had some questions about why there wasn't Stella the personnel, is because she's programmed to do 2 things: complain to Mud and turn off when he tells her to shut up. And that's not a personnel. That's a 1 cunning at most personnel. And then who's going to play with that? So one of the things we did for a couple cards, and this is just an example, is cut out the middleman of I download the thing you actually want. Just give them the thing. They can just run that instead of the thing that downloads it.
Right. And I posited on the boards what it would be like to play as androids who pretty much play with their hands revealed versus the Romulans that want to see what's in your hand. But I'm wondering how it would work with combining androids with the Romulans. You're just playing the game with your hands exposed.
Well, I mean, worst case, you can use what's his name or you can use Norman if you don't want to show your hand that turn, I guess. Another
Right.
use for him.
I like the psychological aspect. I mean, we're talking earlier about I forget who we were talking about. I mean, I'm thinking Cisco now, but I'm not remembering. I feel like we were talking about someone else. But the idea that the threat of the thing might be enough to change the thing. You know, you get going up against Cisco, for example, you know, you're ready to give someone a combo that has to be in a specific order. Well, okay, well, is there another way I can do this where it won't matter what the order is, and then I can diffuse Cisco without, he can use them or not, it doesn't really matter, you know, and it changes the game, and it makes it so the ability on Cisco doesn't get used because now you're playing around it, you know. And I feel like there's a lot of times that might happen with the androids. You see the person has a large enough hand. Well, I'm not going to do a skill dilemma because they've got those, you know, assume type androids. I'm just going to get whatever skill they need. So what else could I, you know, you figure out another way around it, and then all of a sudden those abilities don't get used because you see, you know, that they probably have a counter to that. So if you had their hand exposed, you'd be able to look the entire time and go, well, they've definitely got 3 androids in hand. No skill dilemmas for this round, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah. Cool. So moving on to the last major theme of the set, Khan. These are a more recent invention than the other cards in the set, but they do a good job helping to fine tune that and give it some cool tools to be just a little bit better. What would you guys tell me about the cards you put in the set for Khan?
For Khan, I felt like it's actually interesting because it's sort of like the polar opposite of the Cardassian dissidents, where I looked at them and it was sort of like, well, they don't have that non-star power, non-hero based, you know, base of skills. So we need to provide them with that, or find a way to provide them with that. Khan was kind of the opposite. They had their 4-cost guys that become 2-cost guys when you got Khan out, and that more or less covered the skills. Like we were talking about, what else could we, what, you know, universal people could we add to them, or non-unique and who we speak, can we add to them? And there's not really a whole lot of, you know, options there as far as what do they need. I mean, you could give them a personnel that, you know, just solves a specific mission that you're looking for, but you know, they need those people. Unfortunately, with you've got a couple of named mains, and then you've got the rest of the deck sort of filled up with those guys. Unfortunately, it was very hard for them to go from mission to mission because all of a sudden the backup characters that you needed to solve one mission were not the same as the ones you needed to solve the next mission. And so, oh, Katie's really good at this mission, and then you get to the next one, and you're like, oh, now I need to switch out my Katie's for autos, and then, you know, because that's more useful for the next mission. And that became very hard for them to come up with, you know, really powerful mission selection that would allow them, you know, to sort of gel from mission to mission to mission. And so what I felt they needed, and I think the guys ended up agreeing with me, was they needed uniques. They needed, you know, people that were, you know, one of the designers once referred to decks as having bricks and mortar. Bricks are the, you know, the basis that you build the deck around, and then the mortar is what you fill in the gaps with. And the non-unique should be that mortar. They should be filling in the gaps. You should look at your mission and go, I need a little bit more, you know, programming. Which one of the non-uniques have that? And I'll throw a couple of them in the deck. So what we needed was more kind of bricks. We needed, you know, things that would bridge the gap between one mission and the next. Regula is a very common mission for them because Khan's got all the skills and it's kind of designed that way, you know. But I mean, we designed, for instance, Ling to be a big help early on to get past SETI Alpha 5. Because once you're out of SETI Alpha 5, you can start doing some other things. And, you know, they kind of needed 2 or 3 of the non-uniques to get there. And so it was like, can we give them a little something to give them that and get them past it there, and also give them something that links that to the next, you know, another mission, couple of missions in the mission selection, so they have choices. Hopefully, I wasn't really around when this was coined, but I think I get the concept of, you know, a Lego deck. Hopefully, we did not make that. Hopefully, we made something that you can. I'm with my con guys. I'm going to go this direction. I'm going to do this mission selection. That was something we really looked at, you know, what's available for them. So there are some options out there. It is con, it's not super wide. It's not a ton of options, but they do have options that you're not sort of stuck with just doing, you have to do these 5 missions. That's the only ones that they can do. So yeah, I think that works out well.
Well, I don't think we could have possibly made them more Lego than they already were. They ran the same missions. They all went through the space and planet gimmick. And the big problem that a lot of these cards, at least their Genesis, seem to start from is, how do we fix the problem that nobody wants to play con, because it's such a pain to get off of the first planet, and it's so easy to get completely locked out of your deck from a whole bunch of things, some of which you can't control and some of which you can. So these cards with the errata, I think, should hopefully turn con from something you see once a year and it goes in last place to a viable deck that you'll see often. Not that people couldn't do well with it before, but it's just really hard.
I saw some interesting gimmicky stuff with them before, and I thought those were sort of fun. But again, they weren't using con for, you know, the sake of, you know, like what they were designed to do. And so that was one of our goals, was like, let's try to bring out that essence that kind of has gotten ignored because it's, you know, doing it pure con, that's too hard. So let's try to make it so it's not that hard.
Yeah, and it's at the point. And it's at the point where we actually do have a con beginner deck, which, you know, say that 6 months ago. And this set also came with some very important errata for key con cards. Ben, you want to talk about those a little bit?
Well, so originally we tried to come up, or it was attempted to make a ship that kind of was a temporary ship to get around the fact that you could get locked out of the 1 personnel who enables your entire deck to run. But people didn't like having a ship for con. It didn't feel con to them. So that then became an event. And then there was a whole bunch of issues with the event. So finally we decided, we want to do the errata anyway, let's do the errata. And the problem is, it's difficult on the card, on the personnel to do that, because he's already so full. And there's only so many ways you can try to get him around everything. And finally, I suggested just put it on the mission. And after some debate, we agreed to do that. And then the problem is it doesn't fit on the mission. So the solution is, well, in this case, at least we have a mechanic we can use. We can make it flip, and the backside will have the text, so it fits. And that's what we did. And I know people don't like flip missions, but in this case, I mean, it's better than super tiny font.
Yeah,
it's better than a Yu-Gi-Oh card.
There's certainly a contingent that don't like the flip mission, that's for sure.
Yeah, we really tried to make it, but you see on the card we worked on the card. We worked with a card creator, making the letters, the fonts smaller to get more text on the cards. And when we had a version that worked, that fit on the card, then there came a note from rules that there's another problem when we do this. and all the space we bought us with making the font smaller, the letter smaller exploded. So the only and my idea was always, if we have problems with Khan, let's fix all with this set, or most of them with this set. And everything we tried failed because of space, too complicated text, too long. And so this was really necessary to make a flippable mission to get the stuff fixed. Yeah.
And also, we just generally don't like messing with the font like that. I think the most we'll do is change the spacing between words slightly, but we don't want to. Right now, there's a hard limit of sorts on what design can do with a card without going over the character limit. And that's something I think that's worth keeping for a whole bunch of reasons. So this also lets us do that.
I played the Stargate card game for a little while, and they have wildly different fonts on some of their cards. They seem to want to have large font for the text, but if it's too small, they just keep shrinking it and shrinking it. So there's cards that are like, you feel like you have to take a magnifying glass and read because there's a lot of text on them. And yeah, it's disconcerting. And then you look at another one, it's like, what is this, made for, like, you know, an 80-year-old with really poor eyesight because the text is so large. Yeah, it's yeah, that's something that it's frustrating every time at every level. Designers are like, oh my God, I can't put this much text in a card. This is horrible, but this is the text I need. Art's like, we can't fit it on. Playtesters are like, this sucks. Proofreading is like, can you stop with the walls of text? You know, like every time we try to make, you know, and really, if you think about it, the idea behind the concept of, hey, once you complete this mission, you get a ship. I just explained it super easy, but that takes a lot of words on the card to make that happen, you know, and cover all the different possibilities. So yeah, it's unfortunate. And believe me, every time it happens, designers don't like it either. It just kind of, sometimes it's what the, you know, the language of the game requires. And we try to avoid it as much as possible. I'm looking forward to the next set because I don't have any of that right now, and I'm very happy about it. But yeah.
Yeah, and on a much more personal note, thank you for preventing Rule of Hell from getting off the commission. It happened to me at a tournament. Not being able to play personnel is not a fun time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of cannot remove from play as a thing instead of destroy, because there's a lot of ways to remove a thing without destroying it. So hopefully that becomes more of a thing for things that are this important.
Yeah. So looking at more of the one-off cards, specifically starting off with Barge of the Dead. Ben, I see that you actually used this deck at Continentals, and looks like it did pretty well. What made you put it in the deck, and how did it do?
Didn't do as well as I hoped it would, but that was probably up to me. I don't know. I'm a little more on the fence about it. You know, I think there should have been a little addition to that card, and in a way that you could only hang on, what am I trying to say? I would have liked to have it in a way that it would say, like, you could only place people on there that got killed by a dilemma or in combat or something like that. Because right now I kind of like, I try to, you know, break my own card by killing my own people with flaw in the plan. And at least in one game that worked out pretty good, by, you know, killing off a bunch of one-costers, you know, putting them on there and then, you know, constantly unstopping your personnel. And I would say in that regard, it's the card is probably a bit imbalanced at this point. On the other hand, I had a bunch of games where it didn't do anything. So if people don't get killed, there's no use for it. I mean, it's there for a one cost and it doesn't hurt. But I had just about as many games that in which it worked well as I had in which it didn't do anything. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay. All right, and then if we're going to discuss one-offs, there's no better card to discuss than the promo from the set, Porthos. Just love this dog, bit of a different skill selection, planet version of a popular space card, Spot. So glad to see this one in the set. And of course, there's also Rashawn. You guys have any thoughts on some of these one-offs?
I loved when I first saw Porthos in the file because it gave me memories of Hard Time and not the dilemma, but the set where we did a bunch of, let's take a planet or space dilemma and then make its pair type of stuff. So that warmed the cockles of my heart. Yeah, just have some love for it just for that.
Yeah, Porthos was originally from, I say from, but kinda from Caretaker insofar as he was come up with during that process, but he doesn't fit in there because it's not a Voyager thing, and that's the scope we had. So rather than throw it away forever, it went into the cut file and got to come out for this as a submission, thankfully, because it was just too cool a thing not to have. Another story first idea with the mechanic pairing of Spot, but also trying to cover the original fluff that it had before Creative went to work on it was the episode where Porthos pees on the sacred tree and Archer has to be tested on his diplomacy and leadership abilities on how to deal with it. And that's what the card does.
I don't know. I think we could have made it Voyager themed. Like who's their pet? We could have made it.
Could have, but it wouldn't have been Porthos.
Right? We could have made it Neelix.
I don't think anyone wants to save Neelix.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Anything else before we wrap up?
Just to add something, I'm a big fan of Rashawn Uxbridge. I like that that's there for everybody to use, and it made me think about playing the old no win situation outside of a DS9 deck where you have defensive upgrades to protect it. So that's at least something it gave me an incentive to pull that old deck out and try to do something new with it.
I think from the very beginning of the game, they probably should have had a hierarchy of event destruction based on cost. There's trying to remember what it's called. Is it Swagger? That might be another event, or interrupt. But there's one where someone's choking someone, I think, and or maybe that, I don't know. Basically, it looks for like an event that costs 3 or less or something like that. And I feel like, for they're setting themselves up right from the very beginning of let's lose 5 points. Okay, sure, you lose 5 points, you can destroy anything. But then after that, they should have been a little bit more careful about and for this cost of event or interrupt, you can destroy something that costs up to 2, and this one you can destroy something that costs up to 3. And so it's always been in the game that it is much easier or it is just as easy to destroy a high cost event that you paid a lot for and it was hard to get out, as it is to destroy something that was very cheap and you can just spam the board with them. And so I like that this sort of levels the playing field just a little bit, helps that out a little bit.
Yeah, and it was from the beginning, I think it was that was a card that was nearly come from the community and made it nearly 1-to-1. It was, as a concept, it was a universal card, and so not unique, and that is what was considered too strong in playtesting. and yeah, that is what I can remember. It was as a non-unique card, but it was too strong to make it run. And the other option that was discussed in playtesting and in design is making it a ritual. You can download it. It does not fit in the theme and was too strong too. Yeah, that is what I can remember from the original card to the final card we have now.
Cool.
Just doesn't work as a ritual because rituals generally affect both players, and there's no real way to do that that makes sense with this concept. So I don't think that pitch version went to playtesting even, but yeah.
Yeah, it might be. It was suggested by the one who gave it to us from community. Yeah.
Perfect. So to wrap up, go ahead.
Did you want to talk at all about the community concept or how the project went or something, since we're all here?
Please. Yeah, I did like how all these cards at the very least originated from the community. One of the things that I really like is coming off the last set, which just had one designer on the table. Well, it was designed by multiple people, but it just has one designer on the cover. This one didn't have any designers. You guys are more developers.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an interesting experience. I think, yeah, I always like it when every set's a little bit different and a little bit, of a different experience. I just like, if I'm just working in a factory and just doing the same job every day, every time we come up with an expansion, it's, I don't know, that wouldn't be as interesting to me. So when I was originally tapped just to give some advice, and then it was I think I really delved in here and had a lot of fun doing this. I'm glad that I got to stay on board. Oh, by the way, sorry, I looked it up. Yeah, it was Swagger. I'm conflating the picture with something else. That there's some other thing where they're choking someone. Not that, but yeah, the card that I'm talking about before was Swagger.
Cool. Yeah. So Ben, this is your second set. First
Sorta,
one was more of a traditional set, Gorgo, and then this set was more cards in the community. How do we polish them up and make them look awesome? Want to talk a little bit more about the process?
Yeah, this was hard because Tajark got a ton of cards and then he sends a chunk of them to us, and then on both ends we're filtering through, is this concept workable? Is this going to be broken no matter what we do? Is this too weak? Is this too strong? Does this fit with anything else such that it can run without a ton of support that's going to have to come from somewhere? And it's kind of like working on a set with 20 other designers who don't talk to each other, and it's really difficult. And we also, we never promised we would do this, and it wasn't a written policy or anything, but we independently decided as a group, let's contact each of the designers that we can and have chats with them to work with them to try to make sure that the card reflects what they want. Because they didn't hand us a paragraph of what they were intending to do with the card when they gave it to us. So sometimes we didn't know. And that's also a ton of work because different time zones, a lot of time and energy. So this set probably took at least twice as much effort and time as Caretaker probably would.
More.
Definitely
more. Yeah, it is really.
And to what extent, at the end of the day, the community thinks it was worth it, I don't know. I do know that if we were to do this type of thing again, my personal preference would be instead of submitting cards, they submitted like just the paragraph of what their intention is, because it's a lot easier to make the card that they want than to reverse engineer from the thing they give us, which is a lot of.
Some of it was,
and then do it again.
The raw material and trying to figure out, okay, do I try and make this work or do I mine something out of it that, like there's a lot of the stuff that, I read the first card, and I don't mean this to sound insulting at all. It's very common for even, experienced designers to throw something out there and everyone would be like, oh, no, we're not doing that. But that was sometimes my reaction to something was like, oh, that would be bad. No, we're not, but then, really looking at it okay, but is there something in there that I like? What can I say yes to? That's sort of become my design philosophy is, trying to say yes, trying to say, like what, if someone pitches an idea, I feel like it's the death of creativity to just be like, nope, that's a bad idea. Or, like look for something that you can find in there that you can say you like. And it's not just about being, overly optimistic or anything like that. It is seriously about like, let me find something that I like out of there, and then the person that's pitching it will have value, and they'll keep trying to hone in on what is the good idea, and so we kind of had to do that as well. But it's always an experience to try and figure out, here's this, kind of raw material, and what makes it good, what makes it worthwhile, what makes it good for the game, and worthwhile to have in the game, and just try to make that more pure.
Yeah, or conversely, what also at least happened at least once is, oh, this card's trying to do X. That's great. Let's make it do X better. And we go to them and they said, no, we wanted Y. X is incidental.
Yeah.
So we have to go back and make it Y instead.
I actually would like to apologize. I forget his name now. The guy behind the Cardassians. He talked about it on the board. I looked back at our conversation, and I guess his last reply to me, I thought was, okay, give me time to think about this and I'll get back to you. And then I never heard back. But he had gone further down the message and made replies to things that I hadn't seen until I feel really bad about that until after the process. I'm not sure how much that would have changed anything, to be honest with you. We could have gone back and forth and maybe found a common ground on the points, but I do want to apologize. I feel bad about, I just read everything above the previous email message and didn't know that in the body of the replied message that there was extra stuff added in until, I don't know, it was about a month ago or something like that.
He did say he walked away or quit contact or something. So
yeah, if that was the reason he thought that, I'm sorry. I didn't notice. That is totally my fault.
Yeah, but you see, finally, it was my idea to go for the community set, and I agree with Giorgio a little bit. It is a lot of work, and it's simpler to as community. Okay, what do you like? We should focus on. That is easier. And it's very hard. It's very hard to work with ideas. With when people come and give you an exact card, and from the beginning you say, okay, you will have a lot of problem. So it has advantages and disadvantages. I can say it to you, we have the Borg card in the set, the Borg mission card in the set. This 20-point mission card where it was very easy. The card was given to us as a 30-point mission, and for different reasons we make it a 20-point mission. And we discussed with a guy who gave us a card and said, okay, you gave us a 40-point mission. What were the reasons for the mission? And we want to make it a 20-point mission. And we gave the reason, and he said, yes, okay, that makes sense. Okay. On the other side, we had community members who said, I want this card exactly how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You give them exact text.
Yeah.
You get exact text, and it's like, no, don't change that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also fear that if they came up with, ideas, like doing what Ben said and give a paragraph and say, okay, I'd like to see this in the game. Then when you like, okay, here it is. They were like, no, not like that, So
yeah,
I think, no matter what, you can run up against criticism, but
but that was maybe a lack of communication, because people are not aware. Not all people are exactly aware of the system, how it works, that we have play testers, that we do changes in play testing. And because it was a lot of work and we get a lot of different ideas, we had to filter at the beginning the most things we can make run, we cannot make run. So I think it was worth a try, and I like to work with that in a modified way. Maybe that people give us ideas, or we make a public vote where we say, okay, where should we focus on in one of the upcoming set? And they say maybe, okay, we like to have something with cadets, and we say, okay, cadets is a good idea. Maybe you give us some ideas for cadets, not exactly, or getting better communication, how the process works. So it was, I think it was learning for the community, it was learning for us. It was a lot of work. But finally, I have to say, the set is a very interesting set, giving a lot of options what you can play on different levels. There are things that are easier to play. There are cards that are more interactive, like the Bajorans. So it covers a lot of different affiliations to play, options to play. It has totally new idea like the dissidents. On the other side, it supports existing themes like the androids, giving them more options too. So finally, I have to say, inspired by the community, and even with a lot of work we did, and we really had a lot of work with designing, communication with community members, doing play testing, and it was worth it. And I think the set is really well balanced and gives a lot of options, finally inspired by the community. Let's say not a community set, maybe it's, let's say, inspired by the community, to be fair, because we could not take everything what one.
If I might add something to that, I think it's quite obvious that, you know, a lot of people and you know, enjoyed what came out with the set, and there's obviously a couple of people that weren't very happy with, you know, how their stuff turned out. So, but I think, you know, I think we should take a little bit of blame for that, because I think if we ever were to do something like that again, then we should probably nail down the details a little bit better of what we're actually wanting to do. So, I mean, I think this started out in a way that we said, like, you know, this is open for every community member to send in one card. And therein that would have been a little more simple if it was, you know, just that one card that you have to, you know, judge off of, and whether or not what it was going to do. But, you know, when there weren't that many community members sending in stuff, then we kind of like sort of open it up to, you know, give us more. And you know, it kind of sort of built itself, where then people were trying to do these kind of like, you know, sort of mini sets or stuff that was playing off of each other. And I think it got a lot more complicated along the way than it was originally intended to be. So I think in that regard, we should probably, you know, if we ever were to do it again, probably think about exactly what we're trying to do, and nail that down and communicate that to the community, so they, you know, everybody knows, you know, what kind of game they're in.
Yeah, I think the two areas of communication that didn't work out as well as we should have was the announcement of when to submit stuff, because not everyone saw it, and some people saw it and it was past the window where that type of thing could happen. So it would have been better if that was way more public with much bigger leadway for people. And the other was the way that the set worked is you basically submitted individual cards. And if you submitted more than that, okay. And they were picked and developed on an individual basis, except when we get these 3 individual cards that work well together if we do this. And some people, I guess, were under the impression that it was, I'm submitting a slate of cards. This is my set within your set. And if you accept one of them, you have to accept all of them. And I am the authority on whatever this gimmick or thing is. And this is how everything's going to be developed from here on out for them. And that's just not how it was ever working.
Yeah.
So it is on me. It was a new experience for everybody, for us as designers, or we have to communicate things better. It was also experience for the people who gave out the cards. It also goes on me. I had to say, okay, if you give us cards as a community cards, you are like every other designer, and every designer has to be expect that their card is change during playtesting, during development process. And even if it's a good card, it can be cut very late in the process of playtesting for some reasons. Yeah, and that is it was a new experience for me, and so I have to apologize for this lack of communication. But if we do it, if we do it again, or try to do it again, or work with that, we have to change a little bit, communication better, setting a kind of frame how it should work, making public announcement, and. So it was the first try. We tried it, and we made mistakes, but finally I have to say the product we had with the support of the community is not that bad, really.
Yeah. So on that note, I want to give a huge thanks to the panel, Tiark, Richard, Ben, and Ben. Also, the decks that I showed, I will be putting in the show notes, either me or my assistant will be. Those were created by people in this meeting. Also, Lucas Thompson made the beginner decks, and the Cardassian deck is courtesy of Michael Van Bremen. I think almost all but one or two of the cards in this set are in a deck